Right, so following the attack by Israel on the Russian Khmeimim airbase in Syria earlier this week, ominous signs that something was afoot came soon after, with Russia telling its own people, some 1.5 million of them living in Israel, to get out, and also telling them to leave Lebanon as well. Following that, there was an apparent snub from Putin when Netanyahu tried to call him, again reinforcing fears that Russia might, as a result of Israel's out-of-control conduct now towards them, may well be considering a more proactive role in matters, especially since they are allied with Iran, both Russia and Iran being part of the ever-growing BRICS group of nations. Now, I postulated the other day that perhaps Russia might not want to get involved in another war, given they are still battling their own invasion of Ukraine, that they are preoccupied with bigger problems right now. But actually, there's an argument that Russia have no choice but to come to Iran's aid, and by association their allies in Hezbollah and Lebanon. And Netanyahu may well have calculated this in his ongoing desperate attempts to involve the US in the Middle East militarily. But at the same time, it's a move he may end up regretting as well. Right, so is Russia formally getting involved with Iran against Israel? Well, the signs continue to point to that being yes. Following Israel's strike on the Khmeimim airbase in Syria, arguably a provocation, just as the targeting of the Iranian embassy in Damascus was a direct provocation of Iran, which resulted in their response being the first direct attack by Iran on Israel in their history, though you'll only ever hear of how awful Iran are for doing so from our media. There have been the calls from Russia to their people to not just get out of Israel, sparking fears of a military response from Russia, but also for them to leave Lebanon as well. Obviously, with Israel attacking that nation as it is, there are fears for their safety, just as our UK government have been telling people to get out too, though of course the UK chartered just one plane to do it and told their people if they wanted out, wanted a seat on it, it'd cost them £330 a head. Survival of the richest, as that was seen to be. But as far as Russia go, if they are such an unhinged and awful country, they've shown us up here as being even worse in their response to their own people, because they've literally been carrying out evacuations themselves. I mean, we have a military air base on Cyprus, just 150 miles from the Lebanese coast as that is. A military evacuation of British people seems perfectly possible to me. I can't imagine what they're doing out there that takes precedent over that, to be honest with you. Nothing at all to do with US flights being carried out from there to Israel, widely suspected to be delivering arms shipments to the genocide state. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with that, but we can't know for sure because Starmer has banned questions on operational activities at RAF Akrotiri being asked in Parliament. All very democratic and not at all suspicious, eh? Anyway, with Russia getting their own people out of the way of danger, both in Israel, which is itself being targeted, of course, as well as Lebanon being targeted very much by Israel, there was then the alleged call from Netanyahu to Putin, which got snubbed. And if that story is true, it certainly makes sense given the alliance that exists between Iran and Russia. It's no exaggeration to say Russia's war in Ukraine is not going their way, is taking far longer, costing far more than Russia expected it to. And according to Al Jazeera, this has made Russia more reliant on its allies in order to keep it going. Russia has received significant Iranian assistance for its own invasion of Ukraine, tying it to Tehran's interests in the region. Russia has been closely cooperating with Iran for the past 2.5 years, but exclusively in the military sphere, said Ruslan Sulaymanov, an independent Russian specialist on the Middle East based in Baku, Azerbaijan. Iranian weapons are in great demand. They have never been in such demand, and Russia has become dependent on Iranian weapons. Iranian military instructors, Sulaymanov said, now visit Russia and are helping to build a factory for the production of Shahed drones inside Russia. As a result, Russia is forced to support Iran's allies in the Middle East, such as the Hezbollah movement, Sulaymanov said. So Russia and Putin, because of Ukraine, may actually be forced to come to Iran's aid now, and that of its allies in Hezbollah, who Russia are not as keen on, it has to be said. I don't really think Russia wants to be taking a proactive role in the Middle East. They're reliant on Iranian arms themselves right now to keep things going in Ukraine, but that isn't to say the disorder in the Middle East isn't to their advantage, because with Israel acting like it is in order to try and drag the US into more war to help them, it's distracting the US from Ukraine, which benefits Russia. What doesn't benefit Russia is Iran becoming directly involved, and so to keep Iran happy and keep them supplying Russia with arms that they need, they're going to have to expend some time and energy defending that arms trade. But coming after that attack on their airbase, well, it certainly gives Putin the excuse to move in and make his presence felt. To that end, claims by retired former US Army colonel and former aide to US Secretary of State Colin Powell, a chap called Lawrence Wilkerson, a long-time critic of Israel from within US positions of influence, has said that he has been told that Russia already has people in Iran and that Russian aircraft to support any Iranian push on Israel or response to any expected response by Israel still to come after their airstrikes from Tuesday night, which if true, and he doesn't cite his sources, military as they are alluded to be, would be entirely in keeping with Russia's obligations to support Iran and would certainly bear out the speed with which they have been evacuating Russians from Israel and Lebanon. If Russia themselves think they may end up having to get more directly involved very soon in defending Iran and their allies against Israel. With Iran having threatened a larger response if Israel strike them again, though, both attacks by Iran on Israel having themselves been retaliations to Israeli attacks, of course, not that our media promote that line whatsoever, be it coming from the likes of Iranian politicians or the message being carried on news programs here by guests such as Professor Mohammad Marandi of the University of Tehran, who has been tearing apart pro-Israel narratives with ease on our news channels of late. Israel's threat of another response really would be best left as a threat instead of something to carry out. But you just can't see an Israeli leadership as desperate and out of control as this one is, listening to reason now any more than they would have done a few days ago. For as long as Israel can rely on Israeli arms and support, they're going to keep provoking matters until they get what they want or the US administration finally get real. Meanwhile, if you've not heard of Professor Mohammad Marandi yet, haven't seen him on TV making establishment client journalists wish the ground would swallow them up whole, then this video recommendation is essential must-view watching in my view. We don't get the Iranian side of the story often, too indoctrinated by the bias of our own politicians and their loyal media and their allies. But when it does get a chance to cut through, it resonates, and that's usually because the ring of truth generally does. Give it a look as you suggested next watch anyway, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.